So I'm going to talk about I'm now running our existing building team and at McGran, and we are working in doing a lot of retrofits on existing buildings, including in this particular program, the Climate Friendly Homes Fund, which I am going to talk about today. So that's me. I am the Director of Engineering at McGran. I also run our existing buildings group. McGran is a firm that does anything at the intersection of multifamily buildings generally and energy. So new construction, engineering design, and retrofit. So the Climate Friendly Homes Fund is a program that was approved and is being run by, where can I see my name? Cannot see my um, under the New York State Housing and Community, the HCR plan identified $250 million for the Climate Friendly Homes Fund. Some portion of it, the $150 million, is being administered by CPC, which is a funding organization that targets energy efficiency work, and the other piece is being administered by HCR. These are a little text heavy, these slides. I promise we'll get into more fun pictures of actual buildings and stuff. But I included all of these in case for those of you who are doing program design and this stuff might be of interest, so kept small print here. So it started off as sort of $25,000 a unit in grant funding for affordable multi-family housing. It started off on sort of smaller projects, but has expanded, and the per unit cap increased for several reasons that we'll keep talking about here. The goals were to install heat pumps for heating and cooling and heat pump water heaters. Also, they were able to fund electric capacity upgrades, so panel upgrades or service upgrades, a little bit on sort of other work you might want to do in order to facilitate electrification. And they also pay us. So they pay McGran and several other engineering teams and pay the soft costs to do assessment, engineering, and support through construction admin, as well as sort of funding the whole loan process. So key goals were targeted electrification in LMI or disadvantaged communities, providing up to 100% of the funding. They also have goals for education, which are, this presentation came out of that. We presented at the Building Performance Conference earlier in New York this year. So they started out with sort of under 50 unit style buildings, have moved up to larger buildings. They do campuses where you have lots of buildings. If you're not a subsidized housing, you would need to have some sort of LMI or disadvantaged community identification. Also rental, housing, co-ops, condos, all of that. One of the major rules of this program that we as engineers and people who are working in this program encountered was the program does not allow cost shifting of heating and domestic hot water from whoever was originally paying it to somebody else at the end. So if the owner was paying for heating and domestic hot water when we came to the property, the owner needs to continue to pay for heating and domestic hot water. Now this comes out of this sector, right? This is affordable. We don't want to go ahead and electrify and shift all the costs of heating and cooling to the tenant, and now they've got these enormous bills that they didn't have before. So that's the reasoning behind that, which we all has made it challenging to retrofit certain project or property types. So the CPC team was responsible for the origination of these projects. So they were working with CDCs, NYSERDA, utility companies, their network. They do a lot of LIHTC funding and affordable housing work. So they had a lot of contacts and were bringing in projects. This program was allowed to stack other funds with it. So you could use any sort of NYSERDA funding or utility funding programs, and they encouraged that stacking. This was not a fund. This money is not tied to an energy savings goal. It's not tied to claiming those energy savings anywhere. So it was nice that it sort of allowed all of those other funds that do that to be stacked. So, the things that we learned as this program has proceeded was that the easiest buildings to manage are those that are fairly new, within 20 years or so, that already have the electric capacity to support domestic hot water and space heating electrification. So already have air conditioning, already have systems that are unitized at the tenant level. Those ones are much easier to do, and those are largely the ones I'm going to talk about today. I'm also going to share some lessons learned from the properties that were not so easy. And the other ones that are sort of easy from a cost perspective are oil to electric, right? Those of us who do a lot of work, of which many of you in this virtual room are, aware that gas to electric doesn't always have a positive cost impact. It often has a negative cost impact, whereas oil to electric is usually works out better. So in reality, we did run into a lot of projects that, or so, and a number of, by the time they got to us, we hit early on in the program several projects that came in and were all gung-ho, ready to take all this good money and do work, and then realized that it was a centrally heated large building with central domestic hot water, and they were wanted to put in individual heat pumps. They would have had to run a whole new infrastructure of electric wiring and panels in order to have that electric heating and cooling system still be paid on an owner meter, or pay all the tenants' utilities, which most people don't want to do. And on the domestic, potentially run into a challenge of having an increase in the cost of that system. Typically on the domestic hot water side, a nice gas boiler is going to be cheaper to run than an electric heat pump water heating system. So that, there is a cost to avoid cost switching, is really one of our early lessons learned, which allowed the administration of the CPC team to start sharing that information early on with owners, so we didn't all waste our time going too far down the line when it wasn't a project that was going to meet the program requirements. And I think I already talked how hard it is sometimes to realize cost savings along with energy savings with the electric conversions. So the program has about over 30, I don't know what this is, 49 projects in actively working right now, split across New York City, a lot in the Hudson Valley, and a few in various other places. They've got another 49 or so in various levels of procurement and design, and a bunch more in the pipeline. So it's been successful. We've been very fortunate to have a lot of these projects in our queue, and been able to really help a bunch of owners take advantage of this program. So I'm going to jump now into the fun part and talk about some of the actual properties that we did work in. So shout out, first of all, to the CPC team who allowed me to use their slides and have been really great partners working on this program with us. And also to HC, which is Affordable Housing Conservancy. They are the owner for the next two properties I'm going to talk about. And Keith has also been a really great partner and really understands how to navigate energy programs and really do well for the properties, and committed to the mission. So the first property I'm going to talk about is called Rocky Glen. It's a Hudson Valley property. It's a visual. You can see it's a fairly new building, or buildings. There are 3 buildings on this site, sort of stacked in townhouse style units, 2 or 3 stories, 82 units, built in 2009. So not terribly old. They have, and you can see, I'll show you a bigger picture later, but they have sort of magic pack style units here. So ducted through the wall, packaged AC with gas heating, and tankless gas water heaters. And so although this property is not that old, they were definitely having some failures with this equipment. Those of you who've worked with tankless gas water heaters know that their lifespan is not terribly long. Typically, 10 years is when you start to see some failures. So they were really interested in upgrading this property it was built to, I think it may have been an early Energy Star project. If not, whoever was, Keith's team was already committed to high performance. They were using the tankless water heaters, which was at the time, one of our, ways to do better with domestic hot water heating and take on this property. So upgrade to split systems. You can see some pictures here. We hung the heat pumps off the walls, nice interior split or nice retrofit on the inside because there was already a ducted system in a closet. And we were able to sort of tap back into that duct system. So that was pretty straightforward. Nice new thermostats. And because they had gas appliances in this closet before, there was already a nice big louvered door, and we used that to put the air source heat pump water heater in there. This property has a year's worth of data, so I will in a minute show you some of the actual usage data pre-post, which is pretty exciting. Anecdotally, they have not had a lot of issues with, I know some of you will say, you're putting a water heater in a closet. What does that mean? Aren't you having issues with condensation? So the short answer is no, we have not had condensation issues. We have not had comfort issues. There have been a couple of cases. These are apartments. If they've got a lot of people in that apartment, sometimes they do run out of hot water. But that's manageable. And the property owner has not had enough complaints that they're unhappy. So they have been satisfied with the performance of these systems and not had undue issues. There are program requirements for the efficiencies that are listed here. We proposed some slightly higher efficiencies. This project was in procurement and construction during the refrigerant transition, so we definitely had some challenges with procuring appropriate equipment. Because it is a newer property, we definitely had need of some of these smaller 1-ton units in order to keep the units from being oversized. So those, we did end up insisting that they stay with the Mitsubishi 1-ton units, and so that was a challenge, but they were able to find those. They did switch to some Cooper and Hunter unit, which had slightly lower COPs, but was much more easily available to procure at that time, and the water heaters stayed the same. So my notes on how much this cost per unit, I think, are hidden in my notes that I am not finding somehow at the moment, but I think this one actually came in, we could do the math, it's a little under the $25,000 per unit. Keith, who manages this property, also was savvy with negotiate or using some clean heat money for some equipment, and so it worked out really well in under that initial dollar cap. They did not have to do electric service upgrades either at the tenant panel level or at the building level. So that made this much more cost effective, as did the fact that, we were able to really tap into existing ductwork, reuse closets, didn't have to do a lot of infrastructure changes of any kind. So these are some slightly larger pictures showing the preconditions. So you can see the Magic Pack here, all these big panels for the Magic Pack, which were very nicely hidden in the stone, making the architects happy. The architects are probably not quite so happy about it now, but those of us who are energy people love it. So we can see that not only we did hang these units from the wall, use line hide to run the refrigerant, power, condensate, etc. up the wall and through the old panels, blanked off the panels. So very exciting to close that big hole in the wall, right? Back to Shane's point before, we don't want to punch holes in our balloons. So, we're patching our balloon here to keep this envelope, improve this envelope. So that was a real nice win. Um, so yeah, so that's what that looked like. And so drum roll, very exciting. So the overall annual cost to run these units actually dropped. So we were all a little surprised about this, but very excited to see this. It was on average, the total charge was 1903 per unit before, and afterwards was 1827. So really a win. We were not necessarily expecting this, but we're very happy to see it. Looking into the details of this is there's both the cost and there's the energy piece, right? So on the cost side, there was an overall decrease of 4%, which is the data we saw on the previous page. If you look at the charges are in solid lines. So the pre-charges are the red solid line and the post-charges are the solid green line. There is a delta here in the winter, right? So there is a winter cost increase of 21%, but the new higher efficiency cooling dropped it. And even the domestic hot water is overall saving some cost, which was really exciting to see. And not what we expected. So maybe those tankless water heaters were really not performing as expected. um, so that's, and with affordable tenants, a lot of the utilities do have programs where you can levelize your utility spend across the year. So this might be a lesson learned for owners here is that working with their tenants to understand that there might be a winter cost delta, and you can offset that by applying for one of the utility programs that allows you to pay sort of a flat rate over the course of the year. On the energy side, which is the dashed lines, obviously we're seeing a really lovely major, decrease in energy overall. So that was exciting. The other project I'll talk about here is this is a senior, affordable senior property. This is in a pretty remote area of New York. It's sort of southern New York, but far enough west that it's probably not in the Hudson Valley, considered not in the Hudson Valley. It's only one building and only 24 units. I'm not quite sure what this meant here. That was not in the right place. It is only a single story. It was built a little bit earlier in 2006. It has had individual gas furnaces with split air conditioners. And standard efficiency central boilers for a central domestic hot water system. So this was a pretty easy upgrade, just like the last one, even easier because there already was a pad for a condensing unit before, so split cold climate ducted heat pumps. And on the domestic hot water side, which is sort of the reason to talk about this project, is that they were really sensitive to cost increases at this property. It's a, community funded senior property. And so they didn't have a lot of tolerance in the budget to see a big increase on their domestic hot water cost. So we did a preheat solar thermal with split domestic hot water heat pumps and backup gas water heater. That's because this is a rural property and they also had very little tolerance for failure. So if anything went wrong, they wanted to have belts, suspenders, and whatever else. So there's a lot of redundancy built in here. We did institute controls that, the gas water heater will only go on if the temperature drops for a certain amount of time. So here you can see the solar thermal array on the roof. These are the domestic hot water heat pump tanks, and this is the gas backup tank. So we don't have full year's data on this one yet, so I don't have any exciting information to share on the cost side here. We are really excited to hear about this one. Our expectation is that the cost will potentially go down on the domestic hot water side on the owner meter because of this solar thermal array. Uh, yeah, so back same um, efficiencies there. Total scope of work here. So these are the old heat pumps. Not, I would, take up a little bit more room, but, here's the new suitcase style ones. Again, not a major, very little change in the visual of this property, which, is something that owners do care about. This one was a little bit more than the 25,000 if someone um, it because of the domestic hot water system, which had a fair amount of pieces to it. So I know I'm running close to the end here. So key lessons learned is, and I've touched on some of these already, making sure that all the investors and property owners and management teams are fully aware of the program requirements, right? So a lot of people were interested in shifting the cost to the tenant meters. That was not an option here. So that was something that was critically needed to be understood. And the fact that if it was going to stay central and that was feasible and in the property, that there might be a cost increase. One of the things that was really positive, or it continues to be positive, is that there is an engineering team to provide support through the lifespan of the property, including through, sort of design and then construction and a commissioning scope. So we are working on these all the way through to ensure that they are installed and you're not sort of at the whim of a contractor who's going to potentially change scope and not have it perform as you wanted. Making sure that the affordability, so that case that I just showed with the making sure we're addressing affordability of the ongoing cost of utilities at the property is critical. The funding stacking is really good. And yeah, one of the things that we think could be improved is making sure that there are some more pathways for some comprehensive upgrades. And we are now seeing some of our older properties that went through this and have seen some initial upgrade increased costs are now looking to go through some weatherization project programs or the new AMP Up program and make some envelope upgrades to offset some of the increased costs that they're seeing.
Emma, may I ask you, like Aisha, Shane just before us, these are all folks who are electrifying with solar.
Yep.
And I saw you had a solar thermal array on one of those
Yeah.
projects. Is there a reason why you're not, as we had to do,
Doing
in
solar.
California has a huge spark gap, and it's just
Mhm.
starting to get reformed, but all of the heat pump retrofits that you might see, not all, most come with solar electric, and
Mhm.
our rebate programs and are designed around adding solar electric with electrification for beyond code solar, all sorts of things like that.
Yeah.
Tell me more about your solar electric incorporation.
So yeah, it was not part of the program. It wasn't something that was included in this program. So it's a really good option, especially for some of these properties, some of the older. We did a lot of smaller properties with sort of 6 to 8 units in sort of old houses that are maybe seeing some cost increases. So that would be a good option. And all of those had central boilers before. So all the heating, cooling, and domestic is on a central meter. So solar is a really good option for them. And yeah, it's good. It's a good point. And I'm not sure why the program did not allow that in the funding, but definitely worth following up to see whether that could be added in.